This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth. That's a fit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
Joey Sly's jacked, by the way.
Joey Sly's huge. So when we
What's up
talked
with
to Joey
that?
Sly the other day,
Yeah.
super nice guy. We spent a lot of time talking about golf, some of it how it relates to kicking, but just also kind of golf.
Okay, don't go
But-
too long on this. You
Well,
talked to
no,
him for
but-
14 minutes. It was absurd.
It's great. We had great
no,
conversation.
it wasn't great.
We had a great
I
conversation.
looked over 3 times and Joey Sly was still talking.
22.
Yeah,
It
he was enjoying himself. It was a good conversation.
It was a long time for Joey Sly. You guys were talking to Joey Sly for that might have been one of the longest press conferences of the summer.
I think Reese said it was his longest scrum ever. But I will say this. We talked about golf, talked about the job, the competition, we talked about kickoffs, and they're all kind of standing there. Goes, you guys got anything else? Like, he was ready for more questions. We're like, no, we'll let you go. He was ready to keep talking.
We'll see. You were ready to declare the kicker competition over last week after the game on Thursday night.
Yeah.
So
I'm still there.
We're getting there.
Yep.
We're getting to that point. But it's Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Catch-22 with you for the next couple of hours. The Patriots will practice this afternoon. So, of course, everything that we're about to say is going to go out the door
Right.
when Drake May throws 3 picks in practice later today. No, I'm just kidding. But
Everybody, you hear that? Evan says Drake May is going to melt down at practice. That's Drake May's biggest defender saying he's about to melt down at practice.
Trust me, we'll get to it.
Mark the date and time.
I think the biggest thing, though, that this is not where I was going to start, but I'll just say this really quickly off the top. Training camp, and I was just talking to Paul about this. Training camp is such a day-to-day grind.
Yeah.
That the show that we did last week is so irrelevant at this point, coming off that joint practice almost. Like, it changes so quickly this time of year because you're watching practice every single day. There's a lot of just data that comes from that it's different than the regular season. The regular season, you have the same take for a week, right? Because you don't see them again until the following game day. So you have the same take for a week. Whereas in training camp, you can have a bad practice one day and you follow that up with a good practice, then all of a sudden your mood changes. Everything kind of changes. We'll get into more of Drake May, though. I want to talk about that off the top of the show. But first, hey, Patriots fans, if you want to see Toyota's best offers, including those not seen on TV, go to buyatoyota.com. It's Toyota's official website for deals from the official vehicle of the New England Patriots. Toyota, let's go places. And easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. Okay, here's really where I wanted to start today.
All right.
So I've done a lot of thinking about last week's show and about all the, what do you want to call it, panic about that joint practice last week against the Eagles.
Yep.
And I stand by everything that I said. It was offensively one of the worst joint practices I've ever seen for the Patriots. It was that bad. The panic was warranted. With that being said, the big thing that I guess am getting at, you mentioned to me early on in the show, and I brushed you off because I didn't want to admit I was wrong, and B, I didn't want to get bogged down by an old argument that we've had a million times.
Well, it was
Okay.
really A, you didn't want to admit you were wrong. B, you didn't want to admit I was right.
No, it had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
No, I'll admit when you're right.
Fair.
But I didn't want to get bogged down in an argument that we always get bogged down on. So I just was trying to move us along as
Okay.
well. But with that being said, I'm a big Rocky fan. So just
Okay.
wait with the analogy here for a second. That was the first time that I was afraid. First time I was afraid watching that offensive line against Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and all the freaking monsters that the Eagles have on the defensive line. That was the first time, if you want to really break me down, if you want to get to the core of the issue, I was afraid, Adrian. I was afraid. All right? And I watched this happen, and I was shell-shocked from it. I was like, oh, no. This is worse than I thought. Like, they can't put him behind this line the way that it is right now. And then the game happened on Thursday night. And all of my priors about Drake May and how I felt his physical talent would just kind of win out in the end with his development all came to fruition in a lot of ways. And I get it. It wasn't perfect. And we're making a lot out of a 6 for 11 for 44-yard performance. But you saw all the flashes of what I have been saying about him for months, which is that if I was an offensive coordinator, if I was Alex Van Pelt, Drake May is the quarterback I would want to draft because he is every offensive coordinator's dream. Yeah, there's some rough things around the edges that they got to clean up and they got to fix, but his ability with his arm talent to access any quadrant of the field. There is no throw or no play call that's off the books because he can't get it there. He can throw the ball outside the numbers from the middle of the field. He can drive the ball in the backside dig through the middle of the field. He can hit the post 50 yards down the field on a dime. He can do it all. He has mobility, in-structure mobility and off-script mobility. We saw zone read, right, on the goal line. You have that at your repertoire now. You have the ability for him to run around and make plays off-script if he has to. You have every single button that you would want to possibly push as an offensive coordinator, you can push with Drake May as your quarterback. And now we're in like the training montage scene of Rocky 3, right? Where we haven't raced Apollo yet on the beach. We haven't gotten back in the ring with Clubber, but we're in the montage where Eye of the Tiger is like starting to play a little bit in the background, right? And he's doing the jump ropes, and Apollo Creed's like Eye of the Tiger, right? And he's doing doing the speed bag and all this kind of stuff. And now my mojo's back a little bit. I'm like, all right, wait a second here. Maybe I wasn't all that wrong. And now we're at the point where I just feel like we can compromise. How's that? Because I'm a fair guy. All right? So we can compromise. For all the people that are out there, and we argued about this plenty in the off season, and this was sort of our dead period topic of conversation, a lot of shows, we can compromise. I'll give you to week 5.
That's okay. So it's funny you say that. I didn't want to interrupt that take.
Just give me 1 second.
Bookmark that concept of week 5, though. Just keep that in
I'll give
mind
you to week 5.
If you're listening. Okay.
I would do week 1. You know me. I've been week 1 since April.
So finish the take and all. I think week 5. It's funny. I was going to come in here saying week 5 too, and I have my reasons.
So week 5 gets everybody what they want. It gives them a month to sort of figure everything out offensively. Yeah. We hear all the time that from Belichick, in the Belichick days, that September has now turned into an extension of the preseason. You're figuring out who you are. You're figuring out your best combinations. You're figuring out what scheme and what your identity is going to be offensively. So let Jacoby Brissett be the test dummy, right?
Yep.
Let him go out there and settle down the offensive line, figure out how they need to play to win football games, figure out their identity offensively, get through a gauntlet to start the season a little bit there. Bengals, Seahawks, Jets, Niners. Really good defenses. Big Lou in week 1. McDonald now out in Seattle.
Yeah.
These are guys that know how to spin the dial on quarterbacks and how to get after quarterbacks. Last point I'll make, and then you can jump in here. That basically puts Drake May into a college football season where he's playing 13 games, which is right around where how many games he played the last 2 years at North Carolina.
12 in a bowl game.
12 and 14 in 2 years ago because he had the ACC champion and the bowl game. So 14 2 years ago, 12 last year. So we talk about the rookie wall and just the length of the season that's so much longer in the NFL and the mental grind that can be. So now in week 5, we've gotten through the first month to get everything hopefully settled down. We figured out our best 5 along the offensive line. We know who our receivers are going to be. We know what the play calling is going to look like. We've gotten through the gauntlet. We've gotten Drake May over the rookie wall and into a more college football-esque season. And I get what I want because I get Drake May out there for the majority of the season. So that's my compromise to end our argument of all arguments, finally, of when he should play. And to the listeners out there and to the people out there that are worried about him playing behind this line and everything, week 5. Any longer than that, to me, is dragging your feet and wasting time. And I think a lot of the things that we see with Drake when it comes to footwork, timing, drop back, syncing to his routes, like all those different things that, the JT O'Sullivans and the Dan Orlovskis and all these people harp on a lot, Chris Sims, those things to me are only going to improve by playing. I don't see how you improve his decisiveness, his ability to sync up with the routes, his ability to drop back pass on a 5-step drop and hit a hitch, in time and all that. I don't know how you do all that kind of stuff and train all that kind of stuff in practice, because it doesn't move the same in practice. The speed of the game is not the same. So that's why I've always thought that he should play. And I think what we saw last Thursday night was that he has enough of the baseline foundational stuff that it's not going to be a disaster if he plays. So week 5 is my compromise. What say you?
So you made a lot of good points, and the college football element of that is excellent. Didn't expect that to be a good college football take.
Thank you.
Yeah, and at the same time, and this is where I'll come back the other way. Well, let me start here. To your point of that stuff doesn't get improved in practice. I think it can improve in practice to an extent. Now, yes, eventually you got to play, but that's where Gerard Mayo talked about this. I think it was Monday, right? That it's important for Drake May to get reps with the starters to build chemistry with them.
Yeah.
And he still hasn't done that. And you've kind of run out of time for that to happen in terms of week 1. So that's where if he was going to start week 1, I think they would have had to start this process a while ago. I'm with you. I still think taking time to figure out the offensive line, figure out your offensive identity, get guys healthy too. I think, potentially having Kendrick Bourne back, maybe not by week 5, but relatively
Hunter
early
Henry
in Drake
too.
May's tenure. Hunter Henry, if he's going to miss time, I think there is value in that. I will say on the flip side, where I've kind of come back, I was more, week 8, 9, 10, where I'm now looking at that week 5, really weeks 5 or 6, however you want to split it, is the locker room. I think Drake May is starting to prove to guys that they can win with him, that he's a guy that's going to make them competitive. And we did this with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi last year. I know this is something Scott Zolak has been very big on. The guys in that locker room, the other 51 guys outside of Jacoby and Drake May, and I could call it 49, take out Joe Milton and Bailey Zappi, right?
Yeah.
Those other 49 guys outside of the quarterbacks. I don't want to say they don't care about the development of Drake May, but they want to play, they want to win, they want to put up numbers, they want to get paid, all of that. They ultimately want the guy out there that's going to give them the best chance to achieve their goals.
Yeah.
And if the locker room believes Drake May is that guy, more so than Jacoby Brissett, and they can believe both of them are. But if the locker room starts to believe Drake May is that guy more than Jacoby Brissett, if the locker room believes Jacoby Brissett isn't going to get them there, and he's had a rough week and a half here, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the coaching staff. Now, for that to happen, Drake May had to give them something to believe in. And I think over the last week, you've seen that for the first time.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is a major change. And I talked about this, Evan, if you remember, before camp, about the goal for Drake May was not to win the starting job. It would be great if he did. But the goal for Drake May was not to win the starting job. The goal for Drake May was to put pressure on the coaches, put pressure on the organization, and close that window, decrease that timeline that the coaches had to sit him.
Yeah.
He has started to do that. Now, why week 5, I think, is perfect, he's not going to, you can even admit, he's not going to be ready for week 1 in the sense that what is he really going to accomplish working with the starters for the first time in 3 practices and at best half a preseason game? Is he going to get the kind of chemistry that he needs with that group in the next 4 days? He's not. I think, would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, but they do have 2 more weeks after that. They're going to have all week next week and all week the following week.
But you need to decide who your starter is before that, because you're not going to – you need to prepare for the game. You don't – Sunday's not when the game starts. The game starts the week before. So realistically, it's 3 practices in a game. So he's not going to have time to do that. I also just don't think you one and done Jacoby Brissett. That sends a really bad message. And Seattle, Mike McDonald, good defense, all of that. Home opener, too. I'd sit him there. Then you have a short week against one of the best defenses in football. Even if he looks ready, short week, no. Give him the full week to prepare. You're doing the kid a disservice at that point. And then after that, you've got to go all the way across the country.
I do, too.
Yeah, I know.
You're telling me.
So tough. Evan has to travel and watch football games. You got to go all the way across the country to play what I believe, Evan, is the best defense in football. If they're not number one, they're top 3.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a tough sell, too.
And just a Super Bowl team.
And
yeah.
I don't really care what the offense does.
No,
but
I'm just saying
the point,
that team is better than you.
Then you come home, you have 2 games against Miami and Houston, who are decent teams, but manageable.
Yeah.
You're not really going to find a soft spot in the schedule unless you wait till December, which we both agree is way too long. So the way I look at it, first 2 weeks, let the kid watch and observe. You have a short week to get ready for the Jets. That's just a fire drill.
Yep.
You then have some more time. You can start to prepare Drake May and still give Jacoby Brissett a full week of preparation for that Niners game. Maybe if it turns into a blowout, maybe Drake May even gets his first snaps late in that game against the Niners. And if you like what you see, week 5 against Miami, boom.
Yeah.
There you go. I think that, and if you don't like what you see, one more week, Houston, then it gets a little weird. I don't love his first start being overseas if they're going to lose a day of practice on the travel. And then you get to an easier stretch. This is like the worst case scenario. 8, 9, 10, Jets, Titans, Bears. That's like the absolute latest.
Yeah.
He should come in. But week 5 against Miami, for a lot of reasons, makes a lot of sense if you have to push it to week 6 against Jacksonville. But to me, that's the window, and I think he's done what he needed to do, and assuming he continues to do it, of putting the pressure on the coaching staff to make the move sooner rather than later, especially if Jacoby Brissett isn't playing well.
Yeah, all great points, and I have one more thing that I want to get to because it irks me. It's probably just a me thing, but I have to get on the soapbox for a second here. But I do want to let you guys know that the phone lines are open. 855-PATS-500 is the phone number. Webradio@patriots.com is the email address if you want to jump into the conversation. We have some emails that we'll get to here in a second after we finish our opening thoughts and all that kind of stuff. But one last thing, because it just gets under my skin, and I just have to get this off my chest. I feel as though the commentary on Drake May, mostly nationally, but just in general, is so contradictory, and it bugs me. It irritates me. I'll give you some examples. Like, I always look at this whole situation, and somebody told me to look at it this way when it comes to scouting. Like, there's macro level issues and there's micro level issues, right? Macro level issues are, for quarterbacks, to me, are just like the physical traits. Like, you have to have the requisite arm talent. You want him to be on the the bigger side of things. Like Drake is 6'4.5", 225 pounds. Like, you want to have those boxes checked from a physical standpoint. And then what I would call just like a general understanding of the position. This is not a pro day, right? We're not routes against the air.
Right.
This is football, the tackle football. So you have to have a general feel, an instinctual feel for the game and coverages and reading defenses and just knowing ball security, like all that kind of stuff. There's a general feel for the game. Another example, Zach Wilson checked all the physical boxes, right? But Zach Wilson doesn't.
Outside of being tiny, but yeah.
But Zach Wilson doesn't have all that like innate instinct for the position, right? He doesn't understand. Like, he doesn't look like a football player. Like, he looks like somebody who's lost most of the time. When I watch Drake May, he obviously checks all the physical boxes that you're looking for, but I also see just a general understanding of how to play the position at a high level. Just a couple examples from the game. We all have broken down or seen the in-cut to Javon Baker a million times at this point. That's a full field progression. He goes through the progression on time. He hits the backside dig route. That's an NFL play. Put that up there. That's an NFL concept. That's an NFL staple play in the West Coast offense, and that's him running it at a high level. The deep bomb to Javon Baker later on in the game, that is a pretty exotic coverage for a preseason game that Vic Fangio called. That is he calls it tricks. And what it is it looks like it's middle of the field to open to high safety. And what happens is that they have an adjustment. When you get middle of the field open and you have a crossing route from number 3 or number 2 on the inside, usually middle of the field open signals that you're going to throw the ball in that area, right? You're going to throw the crosser, or you're going to throw whatever is, over the middle of the field. And so what Fangio has is he has a backside tag for the safety called tricks that safety now is actually going to almost turn into a robber like he would in one rat or one robber, and he's going to jump that crossing route. So what that leaves is the backside receiver, the ex-receiver on the backside. He is now one-on-one without any help in the middle of the field. So Drake May reads out this entire thing and then recognizes that Javon Baker is one-on-one down the field without a post safety up top,
Right.
and he rips the post. That's a pretty advanced level nuanced coverage to be reading out that he read out at a high level. So he has a lot of that innate ability, baseline level knowledge of how to read defenses. So all the micro level things that people nitpick him on, and I felt this way during the pre-draft process too. It bugged me then too, because it was like, what are we talking about here? Like we're saying that this guy is going to be a bust because he took a 3-step drop instead of a 5-step drop, and his drop didn't time up with the routes. Like, you don't think that's coachable? Like, you don't think that that's going to be fixed? It's already getting fixed. Like, we're already 75% of the way there. People harp a lot on his throwing motion. He dips the ball maybe a little bit more. It's a little longer than what you want. That's another thing that over time is just, it's not a big issue. It's just not, especially when you have the type of arm talent that he has. Like, if you had an arm that was worse than his, like below average arm talent, and you have a long motion, then now you start to worry about him being able to hit tight windows, right? Because it takes forever for the ball to come out, and then there's no heat on the ball. He doesn't have that issue. So we're talking about, like, processing, anticipation, drop back timing, syncing routes with the dropbacks, like all of this quarterback minutia, like all this detail, nuance type of stuff. And sometimes, and I'm also really guilty of this, because it's just when you're a film junkie, this just happens. You don't necessarily see the forest for the trees, right? Like you're so caught up in the film, in the details of the film.
I try to tell you,
and you're watching his footwork, and you're like, oh, wait a second, on this drop here, like his foot is like pointed like 45, and I'd really like it to be at 90, and you're like making all these things up on the fly that is just not going to be the reason why he passes or fails in the NFL. And when I hear commentary about Drake May, I see a lot of that type of nitpicking about his footwork, his drop back timing, all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, really? Like, you don't think that this is going to get fixed? Like, with all of the resources at his disposal now, you have private quarterback coaches, you have offensive coordinators, you have quarterback coach here in New England. You have all this hierarchy of people that are going to help him through this process. And what I've seen from him from start to finish a training camp is he's already making strides in these areas. Like, it's already better than it was in college, and it's already better than it was 3 weeks ago, and it's just going to keep on improving. I'm not telling you he's going to never make a mistake or never have a bad game or never have issues in the NFL. There's obviously going to be bumps along the road. But I just don't know if it does any good for people to break down his tape like that and dissect it in such detail. I don't know if that's actually telling the right story. And that's where I've always been with Drake. And the last thing I'll say is just with Caleb Williams. In the game the other day, I actually watched a lot of Caleb Williams' tape just out of curiosity. I love Caleb Williams. I had him as the number 1 quarterback in the draft. He was a surefire slam dunk number 1 overall pick to Chicago. He has as many rookie mistakes on his film as Drake May does. Nobody is out there saying that it's crazy that Chicago is going to start him week 1. It's almost a given. Like, no one thinks that even is remotely controversial that he's going to start week 1, even though he's missing reads and doing things that rookie quarterbacks do, and he's got a ways to go. Everybody is just in agreement that that's a consensus that he should start week 1. But then when Drake May misses a read, it's like, well, this is why he needs to sit for a year, and it just isn't consistent. So you're going to hear a lot of commentary. It's a long way of saying that I have all the respect in the world for a lot of these guys that do it, that break down the film on the national stage. I love all of it. I eat all of it up. I watch it myself. But don't lose sight of the big picture here. just because there's little under the hood, there's like little minutiae of his game that need to be cleaned up. That's what they are. It's not macro level. It's micro level. And I just hate that we harp on the micro so much and point to these as like fatal flaws. Like, this is why he's going to stink, is because of, footwork rhythm issues. It's like, that will come in time. And that's why I want him to play, because I feel like it will come in time faster and more seamlessly if he plays. I don't know how you get him to play more in rhythm and on time with his feet by watching Jacoby Brissett on the sideline.
Well, because you have him do it in practice.
Yeah, but that's practice. Like, what we saw from the recent practices last week before the Thursday night game and then the Thursday night game is that it's different. Like, he was a different dude on Thursday night than he was in the joint practice on Tuesday. When you're in the red non-contact jersey, when you're doing all these different things in practice, it's a different animal than the game.
Well, okay, but do you think he's doing it? He could be better at it in practice, right? Yes or no? Some of these things you're talking about.
He can get better at it, but I don't really think you truly know if he's there and if he's not playing in the games.
But why not wait until he's at a level at practice that you're comfortable with it before you put him in the game? That's what I'm saying. Like, you're acting like they're just going to leave him in the locker room during practices for those first.
No, I'm not acting like that, but I feel like he's already shown that he's pretty much there in practice, especially post Eagles game, like since these last handful of practices, and we'll see what it looks like for the rest of this week and on Sunday. But if his momentum is still pointing upwards by the time we get through that Commanders game on Sunday night, I feel like he's already achieved that. Like, he's already checked that box. Like, I would just get the offensive line figured out. Yeah, no, but I'm talking about just about him being ready.
Yeah, no, I think, look, it's our job to talk about what we see, and that comes with the good and the bad, and there are parts of his game that need to be improved. It's about understanding that in context.
Yeah.
Saying that, there are things that could be better doesn't mean he's going to be bad. That's just, there's no such thing as a perfect prospect, right? He's got to continue to get better, and there are things he needs to get better at, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be good. There are things a lot of players need to get better at, even good players need to get better at. So I'm with you in that maybe some of it gets carried away. I think maybe the organization's under a little bit more of a spotlight in terms of quarterback development, considering how the last 3 years have gone.
Yeah.
Albeit it's a new coaching staff and they weren't necessarily the ones at least leading the way making those decisions the last 3 years. But it's just about understanding it in context, saying there's things he needs to improve on, and saying, he has a chance to be a really good NFL quarterback. Those two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Last thing on this, and then we'll move on. The other thing that I really feel strongly about with this is that when we started doing this, covering the team and covering the draft and watching prospects and having takes on prospects, the person that changed it all for me, really two quarterbacks changed it all for me with quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, right? Those two guys, traditionally speaking, especially Josh Allen, I just didn't see it with in the draft. I was like, this is too much of a project. Like, there's too many broken parts. This is too much of a project. It's going to be an absolute outlier if this guy succeeds. What I feel like we've learned about quarterbacks and all this, it relates to all of like the minutia and the details and the nuances I was just talking about with all of his footwork and all this crap, right? The game has evolved. The game has evolved at that position. It's no longer, and I'm not saying that stuff isn't important, so don't get me twisted, but the quarterbacks that are playing in today's NFL that are succeeding are no longer in the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees archetype, right? Like, those guys that were dominant pre-snap, extremely fast eyes and extremely fast processors, deadly accurate, like all that kind of stuff that we saw with those three Hall of Famers, pocket passers, right? That were just at another level in terms of that. Now, when you look at these quarterbacks that are succeeding in the league 20 plus years later, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, the list goes on and on. Those guys don't always play from perfect bases and platforms with their feet. They don't always throw the ball, over the top Brady style. Like we're so trained from a young age here to think that's the way you throw a football. I would also throw, in this other category, I would throw Aaron Rodgers in there too, because he doesn't play the quote unquote right way either. So all these old like quarterback tropes that we are so used to, these guys don't play that way anymore. And I think the part that confuses me is that when Jordan Love drops back to pass and throws one of his like fadeaways that's become like a staple of his game, everybody goes crazy about it, right? Like it's like, oh my God, like look at he threw it 40 yards off his back foot with the pressure in his face. This is incredible. And nobody talks about the fact that his feet aren't right on the play. Like it doesn't come up. It doesn't come up that Aaron Rodgers throws off of both feet off the ground. Like because he's throwing dimes. So like what difference does it make how he throws? And I feel like that's the same thing with Drake May. Like the people are trying to turn him into this like precision pocket passer where he's Brady and he's like reading out coverages and he's pre-snap dominating and he's perfect mechanically. And like, that's just not quarterback play anymore. It's not going to be Caleb. It's not going to be Jaden Daniels. It's not going to be Drake May. Like that's not what it's going to be anymore. So I feel like we have to adjust a little bit in that regard too. All right. I'm off my
I just now. One thing I'd add to that is some of those guys you named were not highly regarded coming out of college. Even if they were first-round picks, they weren't necessarily consensus first-round picks, or people thought there was a mistake or in the pick or whatever. And the teams did a great job of developing those players.
Yeah.
Goes back to another draft staple of mine, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. Nature versus nurture. Drafting the right guy is only half the battle. You've got to put him in a place to succeed. When it comes to guys like Josh Allen, when it comes to guys like Jordan Love, even Justin Herbert, who a lot of people were not high on coming out of Oregon. And I would say all those teams, at least the Bills did for a time, but all of those teams did a great job of doing what was best for those quarterbacks and not fighting them in their development. And for actually, I think all three of that, well, Herbert's situation is different, but for all three of them, essentially, they were ready for them to start the season on the bench. In Love's case, multiple seasons. Herbert, they were ready, and then the training staff stabbed Tyrod Taylor, and I think Josh Allen didn't start, the first 3 or 4 games of his rookie or something like that?
He came in the third week of the
season.
So
it wasn't a long time, but they were ready to sit him on the bench because that's what they felt was best. Now, there's other guys that are good that started right away, and maybe that's what those teams felt were best. There were also some guys that sat, and that wasn't what was best for them. And there were some guys that started right away, and that wasn't what was best for them. So I get the point you're making about quarterback play is going to look different, but I also think the lesson to be learned there is Drake May, you can't put his development in a box and say, all right, what the Bills did with Josh Allen, do that. What the Packers did with Jordan Love, do that. And if it doesn't look like that, everything's going wrong. No. You've got to let him dictate it and put him in a position to succeed. That is really that's what it comes down to, developing a quarterback. You got to let the quarterback dictate the timeline, and you've got to put him in a position to succeed rather than trying to put him in a box that he doesn't fit in. So far, I think they've done more good than bad with that with Drake May. I would say there's some things I don't love.
I've liked how they've coached him on the details.
I think
and mechanically,
working with him individually, they've done a very good job.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see him get some, even if they're low impact reps, get some more reps with that starting offensive line just to build his confidence. You could tell he was a little shaken early in camp playing behind what was really the third string offensive line.
Yeah.
When the starters were out and the backups are with the starters. But I think they've done so far, and they went out and tried to get him Brandon Ayuk. I know they didn't, but I think they've done a decent job so far of the development part with Drake May, which is going to be important in this.
Yeah, I agree. I feel as though that they've done a pretty good job with him in terms of the quarterback coaching elements of it.
Yeah.
I feel like his footwork has improved, and mechanically he has improved, especially becoming more of a rotational thrower. I think that has gotten better for him. He's got a long way to go, but I give them credit for that. And I honestly would... Part of the reason why I feel like it has improved too is that it's improved with Joe Milton also.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Van Pelt. So
whatever they're doing with both of those guys, who are both these raw, toolsy, I hate using project in Drake's May's terms, but just developmental guys.
Well, there's different levels of projects.
Yeah,
like, there's fixing a cabinet door and finishing your basement. Like,
right. And I feel like
projects.
Both of those guys look better than they did in college. Like,
yes,
Joe Milton's pocket movement is
night and day
from where he was at Tennessee. Yeah.
And so it's funny. I got a call about this on the hub over the weekend. Somebody was just unhappy with Van Pelt and what the offense has looked like as a whole, and basically asking, did they make a mistake? Does his offense not work? And I've seen this sentiment out there from some Patriots fans, like second guessing the Alex Van Pelt hire because of the performance of the offense as a whole, not just quarterback. I get that. The offense really hasn't looked great for most of the summer. But what I would say is, when it comes to the design, the schematics, the play calling of it, you can't judge Van Pelt yet because they're not running his offense. They're running a very stripped down Madden playbook, like simplified version of it, because that's what every team does in the preseason. You're not going to put your offense on tape at this point. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
That's not to say we can't judge him for it once the regular season starts and they are running it. But the only thing you can judge Van Pelt on really to this point is quarterback development.
Yeah.
And in that regard, I think he's done a great job.
Yeah, I have a take on the scheme itself, but there's an email about it, so we can let that tee us off. But let's take these phone calls first, and these people have been waiting. So
we do have a little NFL breaking news that could be relevant to the Patriots.
Okay, 1 second, because I already picked up this call before you said that. Sean's in Vancouver. What's up, Sean?
Hey, good morning, guys. I got up early this morning, so it's nice to speak with you again. Yeah, last week I think I mentioned Week 5 as a start time for Drake May, and I agree. I think that's a good one. I think without Wilkins, the Dolphins defense won't be as big a challenge, and could be something a good place for him to start. Because to me, it's all about how Drake May develops and what is he going to be like ultimately as a franchise quarterback. So it's not about the wins and losses, and I'm more concerned about how he's going to progress through this season and then into the future.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. Thanks for the phone call, and as always, thanks for listening. Yeah, I mean that we're all there. And one last thing I would just add to that too: Jacoby Brissett's play and Drake May's in development are two separate buckets. You can't play Drake May before he's ready just because he's already better than Jacoby Brissett, right? Like he's got to be 100% ready to me. And I hear you about the locker room and stuff like that. And I think that's a good point. But I just mean, just in a vacuum, just because Jacoby Brissett has been, let's face it, pretty terrible in the preseason, I'm not putting Drake May in just because Jacoby Brissett is not setting the bar high enough, in my opinion, right now. It's not quite Cam in 2021. Like, it's not that bad, but it's not quite high enough where I feel like, he's beating out he's really winning this competition over a guy that's pushing it.
I said this the other day. Jacoby Brissett's performance should not impact Drake May's development plan.
Yeah.
And the locker room thing's a little different because guys buying in on Drake May, you got to be able to tell our guys buying in on Drake May because they believe in him or just because they're done with Jacoby Brissett. But Jacoby Brissett's level of play is completely independent of Drake May's development.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't change the timeline.
Yep. Okay, so I want to read this email, or actually let's take this one call because this is probably going to be a longer discussion. David is in Maine. What's up, David?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Evan, you're my favorite. You really do a good job at keeping the unfiltered train on the track sometimes.
Thank you.
So I appreciate every time you're on Unfiltered.
Thank you.
So a quick question. I keep hearing New England has the third pick when it comes to waivers. And I guess I always thought it was just kind of a first-come, first-serve thing. So I was wondering if you could just kind of explain briefly how the waivers work. And also, is it likely that you can find like a starting caliber lineman or tackle in waivers, or is that more just a fill-in-the-depth kind of thing? And I'll take it off the air from there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the call. So it's a good question. This, to me, is a little bit overblown in terms of their waiver priority. So the waiver wire works. First, there's two important things to know. First of all, until claims start coming in, it's the draft order from last year.
Yeah.
Right? So Chicago has the number one claim.
No.
Oh, Carolina does.
has, yeah.
Carolina has the number one claim. Washington, Patriots, so on and so forth, right? So that it's the reverse of the draft order. It's exactly how it works. Then the other thing we should mention, is that players only go through waivers or only subject to waivers if they have 3 or less accrued seasons in the NFL. Once you get to 4 accrued seasons in the league, then you're just a street free agent when you're released. So I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, the Patriots cut Brian Hoyer. He then re-signed with the practice squad for a beat, right? Brian Hoyer was a vested veteran. He'd been in the league for 10 years. He didn't go through waivers. So the player that would go through waivers is like Marcellus Dial, a rookie. He would go through waivers.
Bailey Zappi last year.
I think
actually this year too, right?
Yeah, right? 2022 draft?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And an accrued season means 6 or more games played.
Yeah. And so to an extent, we're talking about players that were on their rookie contracts, right? Like
Basically,
that's what we're talking about in terms of waivers. So to answer the second part of the question, you are not going to find a starting left tackle on waivers. That's not where we're at. Like if that player, a young player on a team is a promising tackle prospect that the team that he's currently on feels like he is going to push to maybe start down the road or has that sort of ceiling, then why would they be releasing that player?
Right.
It wouldn't make, or waiving, I should say. That player wouldn't make any sense. So in some respects, yes, there's always a handful of players every single year that get claimed on waivers that could make a 53-man roster. Like maybe they're your 52nd or 53rd guy. But in terms of that guy actually making a big impact on the NFL team, not likely.
Yeah,
not likely.
Especially not a tackle.
Yeah.
Especially not at that position.
Yeah, like what was it a few years ago? Who was the kid from Navy that we all knew Bill Belichick would like be all over? He's like
Keenan Reynolds.
Keenan Reynolds.
Yeah.
They claimed him, right? I want to say.
Yeah.
And he was here for a cup of coffee, and that was it. So those are the types of guys that you get on waivers. I want to read this email from Adam because I think it's a good jumping off point for the conversation about Van Pelt and the scheme and stuff like that, and then we'll do 3 up, 3 down. So he said he was listening to Zoe, and Zoe was talking about how in practice the plays they were running were not to Drake May's strengths. They weren't conducive to Drake May's strengths. But then in the preseason game, they called plays that more resembled what he did at North Carolina and what he did in college. Yeah. And the biggest difference between the two scripts in terms of was Drake May running the full boat of the Alex Van Pelt offense, to me, was playing from under center. He only had one drop back pass attempt from under center. It was the slide route play action play to Mitchell Wilcox in the flat. That was the only time that he played from under center in the pass game. Then he also had an aborted snap. It looked like that was probably going to be a play fake, but who knows, right? What it was actually going to be. He didn't really play a ton from under center. I thought the shotgun stuff that he was doing was pretty much what they've been doing in practice. But the question that I have for Van Pelt tomorrow, which I think is a big part of this whole discussion, is do they need Drake May to be able to handle the entirety of the playbook, which means playing from under center is the biggest one, in order for them to feel like he's ready to play in a game? Or would they go into a game like a game script that they had against the Eagles in the preseason, where he is playing in the gun for the majority of the game and they're cool with that?
Do you think there's any chance they'd mix in some pistol?
So this is I'm so glad you brought this up. See, this is how this is why we do this show together. That's a really good point. And when you read about some other offenses around the league, first of all, should mention Drake May played out of the pistol a ton in North Carolina. Yeah. That was a big part of their offense.
And I remember you saying at the draft or before, just after, at some point you made the point that it would be a little easier for him to get used to working under center than most of these shotgun-specific quarterbacks because he had worked in the pistol, so some of those play-action mechanics there's a lot of carryover there.
Exactly. So in the pistol, the biggest thing about being under center, obviously the play fake it's harder to read as the defense, right?
It's a lot more effective.
Quarterback turns his back to the line of scrimmage. He puts the ball out. All that kind of stuff makes it easier to sell the play fake. The other thing that is big with the being under center in the run game is that the running back can go either way. Right, because he's standing behind the quarterback. So now he has the ability, you can run it left or you can run it right. And you don't necessarily have that advantage because the back is offset. So now like it's a little bit different for him to run to the same side that he's lined up as. So that's the big advantage of being under center, is that the running back can go either direction and then the play fakes are better. So a lot of these quarterbacks, a lot of these coaches in the modern game, what they've done with these quarterbacks that don't like being under center, and I'll give you an example. Tua does not like being under center. Doesn't like it. Hates it. So the Shanahan offense that Mike McDaniel's running in Miami, that is a heavy under center operation. So what McDaniel's done to build this around Tua is that they've adopted the pistol. So now with the pistol, the running back's behind the quarterback in the gun, so you still have that ability for the running back to go either direction.
Right.
The other thing that you have is that what Tua will do is he'll still turn his back to the defense on a play action fake. So now you're getting that same play action, and you can actually bootleg out of the pistol as well and get the same exact action that you're looking for from under center. You can get it in the pistol. So I wonder if that is the compromise for Alex Van Pelt, because let's face it, the stuff from under center from Drake May has been bumpy at times.
Yeah.
Not so much about the reads and getting the ball out once he gets up downfield. He's fumbling the snaps.
Right.
Like
it's getting to that point.
It's literally getting out from underneath center. That's an issue right now.
Well, but this also goes back to my point. I really wish they'd let him work more with David Andrews, because he's working with Nick Leverett is really a guard who's moving to center. Antonio Maffey is really a guard who's moving to center and struggling. And who else he worked with? Liam Fornadell's a converted tackle.
Nick Leverett.
I said Leverett.
Yeah.
Leverett's a converted guard. Maffey's a converted guard.
Yeah.
Fornadell's a converted tackle. I still don't understand that one.
Tackle to guard to center.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Charles Turner's a UDFA who they clearly don't see
Yeah.
as a legitimate option. So I don't know. Maybe I'd like to see him under center with a real center, and maybe some of that clears up, but we didn't see it. So
right. So I love the idea of the pistol. That to me seems like a perfect compromise to negate the issues that they're having with Drake May playing from under center, but also still running some of the traditional early down concepts that Van Pelt wants to get to. You can still run all the post crosses, the bootlegs, Hank concepts. Like you can still run all of that stuff from the pistol. And it's basically the same as running it from under center without him having to worry about the footwork and the snaps and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Love that compromise. Glad you brought it up. Tua's the real poster child for this.
yeah.
Because, McDaniel, I don't know if he was the first guy to do this, but McDaniel kind of was in a revolution of having quarterbacks turn their back to the line of scrimmage out of the pistol. Like that whole action of turning your back to the line, showing the ball fake, like doing all those mechanics from the pistol was something that McDaniel kind of brought to the league a little bit, and is obviously all over the college game. The other quarterback I just give you an example with is Matthew Stafford. Also hates being under center. So that Rams offense is still in that tree of Shanahan, whatever, and he hates being under center. So they've adopted the entire offense to be more from the gun, and they've thrived when he's been healthy in that regard. So I think there's ways to kind of pivot out of this. The question that I have for Van Pelt is, are you willing to pivot? Right? Is that something you're willing to do, or are you looking at it more like we need Drake May to master being under center so that we can play him under center? It's going to be an interesting question. All right, let's take this last call from Brian in Baltimore. What's up, Brian?
Hey, buddy. Big fan of the show. I was just calling, man, because I feel like one of the under-the-radar things, and I know you guys have talked about it a little bit, is, and after watching that preseason game last week, man, backup center, like what are we doing there? Because I knew it was a few years ago that David Andrews got hurt, and we kind of had a backup plan with Connor McDermott and things like that. But, man, backup center, man, it makes me nervous after seeing those snaps last week that were low and, God forbid David Andrews don't get hurt, but what do you see us doing about that? I still see some guys out there that's still free agents that'd be pretty good, maybe like bringing them in as veterans like Quesenberry or McGovern. But, I just really wanted to know what you guys think we should do about that, because I know that's an issue as well.
Yeah.
Kind of under the radar.
Yeah, it's a fair question, Brian. Thanks for the call. that is actually one thing you might be able to get on waivers.
Yeah.
A backup center
Yeah.
or a backup interior lineman is something that you might actually be able to get on waivers. I'm not overly concerned about Nick Leverett being the guy.
He's been fine. He's just hurt now.
Yeah, he's been fine in terms of blocking. Obviously, they have to work out some of the things with the issues with the snaps because he hasn't snapped a whole lot.
Right.
And so that's where that's probably coming from. But just in general, I feel like as a blocker, he's held his own as an interior guy. So I wouldn't be overly concerned if Andrews were to get hurt, if Nick Leverett was the guy that they turn to. And maybe they can do some stuff like, again, not playing from under center a bunch to try to negate some of the things that they would have with that. But it's something that is on the radar. Jake Andrews gets hurt. That's obviously who is probably in line to be the backup center. You mentioned Charles Turner hasn't really emerged as a UDFA. I was hoping that
Gerard
would be
Mayo
better.
didn't sound super excited about him when he was asked about him.
Yeah, I was hoping that Charles Turner was going to have a better summer than what he's had. So it's a concern, but I also think that one quick thing on the backup center, that's the least of their worries right now.
On the
to an
offensive
extent.
line, yeah.
They don't have a left tackle right now that they feel great about. There's so many other holes.
They
on
might not
this
have
team.
a right tackle they feel great about.
Yeah, there's so many other holes in the first string offense right now to be worried about the twos is a little bit. But I agreed that it is like a low key, sneaky need. All right, let's do 3 up, 3 down. But before we do, preseason is upon us, and Bob's Discount Furniture is going head-to-head with the competition. Dare to compare Bob's unbeatable lineup of on-trend, high-quality furniture for every room, from game day seating to halftime snack setups that cost hundreds, even thousands, less than the competition. See how much you can save when you dare to compare with Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store of the New England Patriots. All right, let's start with the ups because we're a positive.
Real
group.
quick, because
Yes.
I teased this a while ago.
what's your news?
The Eagles released C.J. Uzomah.
Okay. Yeah, he was with the Bengals, right?
He was with the Bengals a couple years ago. He was with the Jets the last 2 years and struggled, but, I mean, who was throwing him the football? The last year he had competent quarterback play in 2021. He caught 49 passes for 493 yards and 5 touchdowns. He is now 31, and he did just get cut before roster cuts. They need tight ends. He'd be at least worth a call, at least worth a workout in my mind.
Big dude. Like big blocker, right? He's like 270 pounds, I want to say.
He is, 6'5", 271.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
You just bring him. Remember they had Algie Crumpler here late in his career?
Yeah.
I think he was playing at like 280.
Yeah.
And they just had him here to block.
Yeah.
Could do something like that.
All right. 3 up, 3 down. Let's start with the ups because I want to be positive today.
All right.
All right. 2 negative last week. I didn't like it. So let's go a little positive here to start. Do you want to start? You start. I always start, so you start.
Sure. Tyquan Thornton. And I'll tell you why.
Look at how the tables have turned.
Well, but listen.
I'll give the take. You're right.
It's not anything he's done.
But that's not
performance-wise.
Fair. That's not fair.
It's really not. It's the way they're using him. He gets the veteran treatment in the preseason game.
I love this.
He's working exclusively with the starters in practice. He's going to make the team.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to make the team. And that makes me nervous because if they're really planning on him having a big role in the offense, that means he needs to be out there. And you can't count on that with him. But if I'm Tyquan Thornton, I'm feeling pretty good right now because I know I have a spot on this football team.
So the big thing for me with Tyquan, and you say he had to go ball against Christian Gonzalez in practice the other day. So
he had one. Yeah.
He's had some flashes in practice. Let's put it to you that way. And I do feel like he's the added weight. Like he just looks sturdier out there to me. Like he's not as easily derailed from his routes. Here's why I'm doing it.
Talking yourself into Tyquan Thornton.
Of course, this is like a summer tradition. Of course, I'm talking.
You said you weren't going to do it this year.
Okay, but here's the thing about Tyquan, and I've been saying this for a while about him, so I'm repeating myself a little bit. But the biggest thing to me with Tyquan is that this offense needs a player like Tyquan Thornton on the team. They need an outside X receiver that can get down the field. The offense needs it. Otherwise, it's going to be exactly what we've watched the last couple of years, where everything is a 3-yard pass, right? Like, and they need somebody, even if it's just as a decoy, that the post safety has to respect over the top, or when he does get the occasional one-on-one matchup, you can throw the go ball to him down the sideline like he did in practice the other day against Gonzo. They need to be able to have that element of the offense, someone that clears out coverage, someone that occupies safeties down the field, takes the top off the defense, and once a game, can you give me one good vertical route once a game against one single coverage? Like, that's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for him to be Tyreek Hill and win 8 times like that. But if you can win one time, if he's 1 for 40 and he's doing his job in terms of the structure of the offense, then to me that's a win. And until Javon Baker gets to the point where he can play the full-time X role, which he's not very close to right now, I don't think, Tyquan Thornton is the best player on the team for that. He's just the best receiver on the roster that does that. And it's more about usage and skill set than it is about anything that he's demonstratively better than that he has been the last 2 years, right? Like it's just the way they're using him within the framework of the offense that gives me a little bit of hope. So yeah, I'm glad you did Tyquan because I'm not doing Tyquan. I told you I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and then you proceeded to explain why you're higher on him than I am.
I can always talk myself into
all right. So you didn't have him on your list.
I did not, because I told you I wouldn't be duped again. That's why. Number 1 up to me is Drake May. We don't have to go long on it, but
one center that won't be available. Speaking of guys you were high on, Yelda Froholt just got a multi-year contract extension with the Arizona Cardinals.
That one stings. Because Yelda Froholt was I thought he was.
They could use Yelda Froholt right now.
He was a good prospect.
Yeah.
I felt like he had a chance to make it in the league. They gave up on him too easily, or too quickly, I should say. I don't want to go super long on Drake May because we spent the first 35 minutes of the show talking about it. But from the Eagles Thursday night preseason game on, he's just been a different guy to me. More confident, more decisive. He's coming on. He's making progress. He deserves credit for that. They deserve credit for that. I'm excited by what I've seen from Drake May, but you guys know that already. So who's your number 2 up?
I had Drake May too. So I guess let me. I'll give you my third, and then I'll think of another one so we don't have overlap. Joshua Bledsoe.
Nice.
I thought he was really good in the game.
Yeah.
Specifically as a pass rusher, which was weird, and not that I'm saying he's going to solve all their pass rush issues, but they're going to need it from somewhere. And if he can help as a blitzer, it's not exactly hurting his case, right? I thought he was really good in the game. I thought he had a couple solid practices the last few days too. Nothing overly flashy, but a guy that's managed to stick around, and you're kind of seeing why right now. He's just a little banged up at safety or in the secondary. He's getting some more reps. He's doing some things that maybe he hasn't done in the past that they're clearly asking him to do at a need, and he's doing them. And that's the kind of guy that usually hangs around again. So good, quiet, but good week for Josh Bledsoe.
Jalen Hawkins is Duron Harmon, right?
Yeah.
He's that center fielder, but if Marte Mapu is not going to be a factor on this team this year,
which he's not, at least to start.
The most like body type is obviously Josh Bledsoe.
So they have those two. They changed the rule this year. You can put 2 guys on IR before roster cuts that can come back, but the rule is you can't put them on IR until cutdown day.
You have to
so like
designate
Jake Andrews doesn't apply, and you have to designate them that day. You can't put like 5 guys on IR that day and say, all right, we'll pick 2 later. You have to choose 2 that day. Marte Mapu, Christian Barmore. It's got to be it, right? Pending another injury?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. The only way it's not Barmore is if the doctors say it's not happening.
And even then, they don't really have it, unless Hunter Henry's injury is worse than we think.
Yeah.
They don't really have a clear second option, and you might as well at that point.
Right.
You're not going to, you can't bank it.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
But Joshua Bledsoe, solid week for him. So that's my that's my second.
Number 2 up for me is both rookie offensive linemen,
Okay.
Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson. Caden Wallace, I'm still feel like he's got a little bit of ways to go with his technique, hand placement, things like that that we've talked about in the past with him. He's still a little bit wide with his hand carriage, and he's letting rushers into his frame a little bit too much, which causes issues with anchoring and sustaining blocks and things like that. But he's making progress and should be pushing right tackle here very soon. I would say he should be pushing Chukwuekorfor early in the season for right tackle, which is a good development. I don't know if he's going to be a stud or anything like that, but if he's better than what you have and he's a young player on the rise, that's the type of thing that you want. Layden Robinson was absolutely outstanding in the game against the Eagles. Now, it was against a lot of backups. I'll put that out there, put that context in there. It's the third and fourth quarter of a preseason game, so it's against third stringers and practice squad guys. But he was dominant at times. Like, he took a blitzer. They sent a blitz at him. He came off a double, took a blitzer and threw him into the ground. Just ragdolling guys. He's a physical guy. He's light on his feet. He's got a good sense of the game and a good sense of where his eyes should be and things like that. Really, really excited about Layden Robinson. The problem with Layden Robinson is it's another guard. Like, if he was a tackle, I'd be like, This is amazing, right? But unfortunately, he's not a tackle. So when you start to factor in your best five and try to figure out who your best five are, it's kind of hard to take City So and Mike on. You're not taking Mike Onwenu off the field.
So that's part of the problem. The only way to really do it to get him in
is Onwenu at tackle.
But then you don't have Wallace. So it's the only way you're getting both rookies on are either to play Wallace at left, which I don't love, or take City So out of the lineup, which is probably the better option, but he's a solid player.
Yeah.
And that's not the guy you're trying to replace. And now you're moving Mike Onwenu to a position where he's not as good just to wedge the rookies in.
Their five best guys, three of them are guards. That doesn't work. So Onwenu and Robinson are in their top five linemen on the roster.
Yeah.
And all three of them are guards, you can't play all three.
You could argue four of their top five are guards and one's a center, honestly.
Yeah, right. I mean, one's a center too. So if you want to put it that way too, with David Andrews. So it stinks that he's not a tackle.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stink that he's good, or is trending in the right direction.
And because somebody's going to say it in the comments, don't just wedge him in at tackle. Just try him at left tackle. No, he's not a tackle.
And Mike Onwenu at 350 pounds is not a tackle either.
Correct.
So that's my second one. Do you have another one?
Jaheim Bell. I thought has made the most of the opportunity with the tight ends out. I don't know what it turns into. I still think he's probably a guy that starts on the practice squad and maybe gets added to the roster later down the road. But he was definitely playing catch up after he missed that first week. And I think now he's caught up.
Yep. I think he's one of those guys that they're going to have to decide whether they're going to prioritize receiving upside over blocking. And when I say blocking, Mitchell Wilcox is the blocker, right? And to me, this is a team that needs to prioritize the upside right now. So I would go with Jaheim Bell just because they're deviated playmakers. They need to find playmakers. And if he's a guy that can be a playmaker, his little spree in the red zone the other day with the 3 touchdowns in like a 10-play span or whatever it was, that was exciting to me because a lot of those things were the things I thought he would be good at in the NFL. Running into the flats and just winning foot races down on the goal line. And one was a slide route from Joe Milton where he just comes underneath the formation and slides out into the flat and he just wins a foot race, just coming across.
Yeah.
It's not like he's getting to the top of the route and he's not Hunter Henry, right? He's not like getting open on Y option or something like that. He's just outrunning people at that size, and that's encouraging. All right.
Real quick before we move on, while we're talking about pass catchers, a number of questions in the comments want to know what you think about Matt Landers.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Last one here. My last up.
Yeah.
Coming around to it. Keon White.
All right.
Thought Keon White was an animal in that game against the Eagles the other night. It's so crystal clear to me now, and maybe it should have been before, but he's so much better as a hand-in-the-dirt interior rusher than he is as an outside rusher.
Yeah, I've been telling you this for months.
And the comp that we've kicked this comp around, I think, before. Trey Flowers. Trey Flowers is the comp to me. He's a little bit more physical than Trey Flowers, and Trey Flowers is a little bit more elusive or just flexible, wiggly, I would say. But in terms of their usage and how exactly they're going to play, he's very, very explosive and twitchy when he plays on the inside. And for some reason, he goes on the outside and he stands up and he's just like this stiff guy. I don't know what it is. But on early downs, if he's a strong outside linebacker setting the edge of the defense and pressing the pocket, fine. And then on third down, he's now, it's obviously not exactly the same. It's not apples to apples, but for the time being, he's the one-on-one guy that wins on the inside for you on third down that Christian Barmore was for you last year. If you had to, he's not Matthew Judon. Right? That's not going to be his game. they're going to have to get by with like Uche and Jimenez and those guys, coming off the edge. But when they get on into third down in their pass rush packages, Keon White's going to put his hand in the dirt. He's going to be over the guard of the center, and he's going to just go to town. Like, it's just going to be one-on-one, and go win. Go beat your block. And he was very good in this game. Still think he struggled a little bit with finding the ball, finding the quarterback in the pocket. It was more bull in a china shop than it was, in terms of sack production still. But that's what they need. They need a guy that's going to get the quarterback off the spot on the interior, and then they need Uche or Jimenez or one of these other guys to emerge as the finisher. Yep. And if that's what Keon White is, then fine. I thought this was his best week of practice and best build-up.
I'm glad he finally came around on that.
Came around. See, I can be
right.
I can admit when I'm wrong.
All right.
I can be flexible.
All right.
All right, let's go to the downs.
Jacoby Brissett.
He is my number one down.
Just a rough couple weeks here now, and the accuracy, the ball's, that's the big thing for me. The ball's getting away from him.
Spotty.
He's not putting the ball where he should be putting it. He's had, I'd still say his summer's an overall positive when you take in the full body of work, but football is a what have you done for me lately sport, and the joint practice, which is the biggest practice of the summer, and in the preseason game where he played the most, he did not look good. Yeah,
it's a fair assessment. I thought the tape against the Eagles in the preseason game was brutal. He missed multiple throws in that game.
Yeah, and the pick was, Mayo ripped him for it.
Yeah, that's why I feel comfortable saying it was brutal, because Mayo called it a terrible play, so I don't really think I could say anything that was worse than that. But on first third down of the game, he has Austin Hooper on the corner route. It's not a great ball. It's just not a great ball. It needs to be better there. The pick was terrible. Mayo was right. Not only, I understand why he came off the Tyquan Thornton read, because they have sort of like a red zone bracket.
Right?
Yeah. So I get why he came off that. Why he didn't move on from Austin Hooper to Pop Douglas on the little return route there, juke route, I'm not 100% sure. You have to ask him. But Pop Douglas was open for a walk-in touchdown on that Edelman route, right, outside inside type of route, and he just locked on to Hooper and threw a bad ball. I also on that play, and maybe he doesn't have this quite in his bag. Like, he could have ran it in, because it's man coverage, and there's nobody on the quarterback. Like, he could have just waltzed in,
throw it away, and look, I know it's fourth down, but 4th and 3 from the 12 as a veteran. Talk Mayo. You should be able to talk Mayo to letting you go there.
Yeah, or at least kick the field goal.
Right.
You got to preserve points there. Some of his accuracy issues that we were seeing in the game also came up in practice as well, so that's a little bit alarming. And just the last thing, the last throw that he made to Pop Douglas over the middle of the field in the game on last Thursday night, that throw was dangerous too. He was like, he got a guy hanging on him, and he whipped it to Pop Douglas, and it went off Pop Douglas's right hand. It wasn't catchable and popped up in the air, and that could have been a pick also. So if he, at the very least, Jacoby Brissett needs to be have good ball security and manage the game, and he has not done that, and that's got to improve. All right, who's your second? Because we both had Jacoby Brissett.
My second was Javon Baker.
Yeah.
Got to catch the ball. It's that simple. This is not a guy that's going to have a ton of opportunities, and I don't mean that in the sense that like they're going to bench him. I just mean that in the way he plays the game, his role in the offense. He's not going to be a high-volume player. His job is to create, ideally, 2 or 3 big plays a game. Yeah. And if he does that, if he has 3 catches, that's fine, because you hope that they amount to 80, 90 yards and a score. When you get open over the top, you have to catch the ball. That's why you're here. That's the primary reason you're here. Not being able to do that, and he struggled to do it in practice as well. I know I've said with him, he's going to create explosive plays. There's going to be drops. The good comes with the bad. You live with it, and you hope the drops don't come in big moments. That ratio is not working in his favor right now.
It's a good way of putting it. I want to give my last one, and then I want to circle back to that, because I have a bigger point to make about the receivers. We have to have a tough conversation about the rookie receivers.
All right.
And we'll do
the
that.
People really want you to talk about Matt Landers. So
Jesus. Okay. Really quickly, my last down, and then I'll circle back to the receivers. Armon Watts.
He's not making the team.
I really was hoping that Armon Watts was going to be a player for them. His tape last year in Pittsburgh was good.
Yeah.
As a pass rusher, I don't know what happened. He's not winning any one-on-ones during practice. He's playing into the fourth quarter of preseason games. Like, this is a classic veteran surprise cut.
Mike Pinnell.
Yeah.
Remember that?
But he's a better rusher than Mike Pennell. Like, Mike Pennell's a nose tackle.
I know, no, but I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
Mike Pennell was signed, defensive lineman. I remember people getting mad at me. I left him off a roster projection.
Yeah.
People got mad at me, and I'm like, he's not going to make the team. No, I think he just, some of it, too, like, he got lapped.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Farms has been excellent this summer.
Yeah.
Tristan Hill has had a very solid summer.
Yeah, and I would also say Aquale.
Quali was always ahead of him to me on
Yeah.
the depth chart, but coming in, you think he's kind of that third guy to Daniel Aquale and Barmore, and then obviously you lose Barmore, but I had him ahead. If I were to do a depth chart, I had him ahead of Farms and Hill, and they've both been better than him this summer. And credit to those guys. That's not saying like he's been terrible and it's by default. Both of those guys, especially Farms, been excellent.
Yeah.
But he got outplayed. He got outplayed by other players on the roster.
Just a little surprised, especially when Barmore got injured or blood clots, whatever, health issues. There was a clear path for Armon Watts already, and then at that point there was like a really clear path for Armon Watts to make this team. And like I said, he had really good film in Pittsburgh last year.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised that it just hasn't been there at all for him this summer.
Look at Mike Pennell. He stuck around, and he's been in the league. What year is that? Probably 19?
Yeah.
And he's been in the league since, and he's been a starter on some good teams in Kansas City.
19, 2020, somewhere around there.
But Coney Ely, I think, flamed out. But, bad summer can change a lot for you.
Okay, let's circle back to the rookie receivers, and I'll finish.
Can I give my third?
Oh, yeah,
Real
sorry.
quick, Marcellus Dial.
Yeah, I mean, that one's...
Has
to be said.
Now, do I still think he can be a player in this league? Yes, absolutely. And another guy where I think the body of work this summer is overall good. He had a really rough preseason game. He had a really rough time in the joint practices. That, to me, is a guy, we talked about it with the waivers earlier. I think in clear waivers, you get him to the practice squad. You continue to work on his game. And I wonder if maybe they should try him at safety a little bit, because good open field tackler.
Yeah.
Good covering space. Can play kicking game as well. And you revisit him in a little bit. I also kind of like we just talked about with Watts. Marco Wilson's been playing well. Isaiah Bolden is playing well. He's playing in the slot more now, which is really important. Who am I missing from that group?
Sean Wade.
Yeah, Sean Wade.
Alex Austin.
Yeah. So, I just think Dial got passed. He got lapped by some other guys that have just been playing better at the position.
Yeah, I would have him off the roster right now. And
I have him as probably my 54th, 55th.
Yeah, nice
like
practice squad potential there.
Yep.
A developmental guy. Okay, let's have the tough conversation about the rookie receivers.
Okay.
So, the Baker stuff is more obvious because of the targets. He's caught 3 of 8 targets, and we all can see it on the downfield targets that, they haven't been great in terms of his involvement on those plays. But the film from the first 2 weeks for both these guys of the preseason hasn't been great, and I'm talking about Jalen Polk also. With Jalen Polk, let's start with him there.
Yeah.
There are still... My big thing with Jalen Polk, and I've been struggling with Jalen Polk.
Yeah.
My big thing with him is that he's going to have to be an expert route runner. Steve Smith likes to say you have a PhD in route running. He's going to have to be an absolute technician at this level because he doesn't have the physical gifts to just win on raw talent. So he's going to have to understand everything from concepts to leverage to how to stem, how to release, like all of the little details of running routes. Jalen Polk's going to have to be a masterclass at that. And the concern that I have with him on film is that these first 2 games, there's 2 or 3 times where there's some clear mental errors where I'm just not 100% sure he knows what he's doing. And I'm not trying to be an ass. It's just he's a rookie, right? And it still looks a little lost at there. I'll give you an example. I mentioned the throw to Mitchell Wilcox in the flat earlier. So that's man-to-man coverage. And Jalen Polk, for some reason, runs into the same flat that Mitchell Wilcox runs into. And the guy that actually tackles Mitchell Wilcox is Jalen Polk's man. Jalen Polk's man comes off of Jalen Polk and makes the tackle on Mitchell Wilcox. If Jalen Polk isn't in that area, there's nobody over there. Mitchell Wilcox is still running, right? Because there's just... his man must have gotten lost in the wash of the play fake or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's nobody over there to cover him. So the guy that actually makes it not an explosive play is Jalen Polk's guy. Because I think Jalen Polk ran the wrong route. Right?
Okay.
So those things are happening. The other thing that happened in the game was the sack in the third quarter of Drake May. That play from snap to time to sack took 4.2 seconds. Too long. You can't hold the ball for that long in the NFL. Some of that's on Drake. Like, he's got to take a check down. Right? He's got to get the ball out. But it's a dagger concept. So the inside receiver is running a vertical route. The outside receiver is running that deep in cut at the sticks. And Jalen Polk's the inside receiver. He gets chucked at the line of scrimmage, gets chipped at the line of scrimmage. And he never really gets back on the tracks. He just kind of jogs up the field, and he kind of does this like squiggly line thing. And it's just not a good enough clear out route. And so the safety, it's quarter half. It's cover 6. The safety is just like sitting on the dig because Jalen Polk doesn't clear out the picture. So he's just like sitting there waiting for Drake May, like, you going to throw it? You going to throw it? And Jalen and Drake May's in the pocket, and he's waiting for Jalen Polk to run through the coverage so that he can throw the dig route. And Jalen Polk never threatens the safety. It just never works. And that speaks to me to more of like the deep speed and the long speed to be able to run those types of routes. So Jalen Polk will be a fine receiver, but they're really, to me, going to have to manage the route tree with him. Like, he's going to have to just live at the first and second level of the defense. He's got to be running in cuts and crossers and, just little things, underneath the defense, hitches, things like that. The third level is not there to me. And if he's going to get to being a really good receiver in this league, he's going to have to be mentally sharper than he's been. So I haven't loved what I've seen from him. I'm not completely out. I just haven't loved it. They seem like they're a little bit more bullish on it than I am because he's been elevated up the depth chart, it seems like, in recent days. So maybe I'm being too hard on him. But I just, there's a lot of things with the film that I'm just a little bit concerned about. That's Jalen Polk. I don't know what your thoughts on him. And I'll give the Javon Baker take. But I'm just curious what you're seeing with Polk.
I would flip a lot of what you said about Drake May earlier onto that. That mental stuff's teachable. That mental stuff's coachable. Now, I wouldn't have him running a ton of vertical routes. I would rather have him be the in-cut on the dig than the vertical. Yeah. Like that. So that speaks to a usage thing, and maybe when the regular season starts, that's what he's doing. But I think that, he's not going to be this big play threat, this dominant. He's going to have to win in the short and intermediate. And that just comes, like you said, with reading a defense and understanding route running. That's stuff that can be taught. He's never going to be an overly explosive athlete, but that's the guy they picked. Like if that comes as a surprise to them, that speaks to a deeper problem. Yeah. I've used the Jacoby Myers comp a million times. I'm going to continue to use it. He's just got to learn how to get open at the sticks, find a hole in the coverage, sit down and catch the football. That's what he's got to do. If they're using him for more than that, that's on them. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I still see the Jacoby Myers arc there. Yeah. It just, to me, it's like with Jacoby, but he was an undrafted guy. It's not going to come right away. Well, Jacoby was also only in his third year of playing receiver. Right. He was a converted quarterback. So let's separate that. But yeah, it's going to be a learning process for Polk in this role, because at Washington, the game plan was pretty much run straight. Doesn't matter if you're open or not. Michael Penix will put the ball in your hands. Yeah. And that's what he did. Now he's got to learn to play the game a little differently. It is going to be a developing thing, but I still think he can be a player. He's just not going to be. I think some people look at second-round receivers and they see Devontae Adams. They see DK Metcalf. Right, thank you. Guys like that's not. A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was a first-round pick. He's a second-round pick. Oh, that's right. He was traded for a first-round pick. Yep. That's not the kind of guy Jalen Polk is. If that's the guy they wanted, they should have drafted somebody else. You can have that argument. I don't know that guy was there for them at that point with the run-on receivers, at least not. Probably not. Not that you would be comfortable taking there. I mean, again, we're talking about now a guy like Javon Baker, who you're hoping is just kind of a big play threat. But that's, he's just going to have to learn to read a defense and find space, because, like you say, he's not necessarily going to win physically. Yeah, it's tough with him because he's going to have to be mentally extremely sharp, and he's going to have to be a really advanced route runner to be a high volume, highly productive player. For the record, I think he can do that. Everything you hear about this guy, loves football, film rat, just wants to understand the game better and is willing to put in the hours to do so, but he has to do it. Yeah, that to me, that whole thing is going to take time, and I just wonder. He's probably going to be in the top 3 until Kendrick Bourne is healthy.
But
Yeah.
my big picture take with both these guys is that I don't want fans to be surprised if they play a little bit less than you want them to. Polk, I think, will play a little bit more than Baker, certainly. But with where things stand right now with Javon Baker, there's a chance that Javon Baker is like a healthy scratch week 1. If he doesn't start to turn it around a little bit. That is not going to be popular. It's a similar thing, but maybe even worse because he's a higher draft pick than like Kayshon Boutte not getting on the field, right? You know, it's going to be like that, where there's this guy that's got a lot of talent and he's got a lot of ability, but he just isn't quite there yet as a football player for him to play in an NFL game, and that's where I'm at with Javon Baker. Two big things with Javon Baker, just in terms of the details. One, his route releases from the outside need to get better. He's not winning early enough in the route, like he's getting pushed into the sideline, or he's getting stuck to press man coverage, and there's at no point in the route where it looks like he's open, right? And yes, I understand that some receivers are open when they're not open and all that kind of stuff, but all those guys still have really good technique at the line of scrimmage, and he's got to develop a go-to release, and then once we get to that, then maybe a counter off of it, right? But if you need to have a best release, like when he's one-on-one on the backside like that, like on the third down play that he runs out of bounds and gets targeted on, that play there is not a mandatory outside release. That's just best release. Like whatever your best move is off the line of scrimmage, give me that and get yourself off the line and get yourself open. And he didn't really have much there in terms of that. And I think it was Keely Ringo, right, who I do like a lot. Keely Ringo just bodied him into the sideline because there's no wiggle there at the line of scrimmage. He's got to get better there. And then obviously there's the stuff with the drops and with his hands. And I thought he slowed a little bit up on that post route, trying to track the ball. Like he comes out of the break, which was a nice break, by the way, a nice little nod, and then hit the post. And he comes out of it and he's like looking up for the ball because he doesn't have his eyes back into the backfield yet. So he's like looking for the ball. And when he looks for the ball, he slowed down a little bit. And if he doesn't slow down, that's in stride instead of him laying out to try to catch the football. It's just little things like that. But I just don't want people to be surprised with Baker if he doesn't play a ton early on in the season.
Yeah.
Because I know we're going to get the calls and we're going to get the emails of people. It's the same thing with Kayshon Boutte or whatever. Why isn't this guy playing? Why isn't this guy playing? And these are the reasons why he's not playing. So we'll see with both these guys. Top 3 right now seems to be Thornton, Douglas, Polk.
Yep.
Maybe KJ Osborne is like
He'll rotate in there.
3.5 with Jalen Polk.
They want to go bigger, take Pop off the field early down.
Yeah. And that seems to be the top 3. People really want to know what I think about Matt Landers, huh?
They're still going on about it.
Okay, so my take on Matt Landers, I remember him coming out.
Arkansas legend.
When you run a 4.37, it catches the eye.
4.37 at 6'4", 210.
Catches the eye. We went over all at the beginning of the show, all the stuff about Tyquan and the role and all that.
Yeah.
That exists for him in this offense. The biggest thing that I saw with Matt Landers, though, that he struggles with is route detail. Not exactly a technician. He's a raw athlete right now. Maybe they feel like that they can develop those types of guys better now than they could before. I'm not holding my breath on that just yet.
Yeah.
But he's someone that, if you're Javon Baker, just a little bit. I'm not saying Javon Baker's making the team. Like, no one's saying that.
Yeah.
But if you're Javon Baker and that with running with the 2s and the 3s and that X role, this is a guy that could conceivably do that. Like Jaquay Jackson was the third X. He gets injured. Now Matt Landers is the third X. That's the way I look at it.
And I by the way, I'm right there with you in that I think he's here because Jaquay Jackson got hurt.
Yeah.
Similar receiver. And like I said, 6'4", 210, ran a 4.37. You're 6'4", 210, you run a 4.37, you go undrafted. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
Right? That he's an incredibly raw player. I don't mind him as a practice squad. It just, like I was saying, I like Jaquay Jackson for the practice squad. Just kind of keep him around, see what happens. Maybe if you really get beat up depth-wise, like I'd feel comfortable putting him in a game. I don't know that I'd feel great about it, but I'd feel comfortable with it. I'd put Matt Landers in that conversation, so hopefully he sticks around on the practice squad. But I don't think he's anything more than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, let's take Patty's call, and then we'll
right.
read some more of these emails to end the show. Patty is in Agawam. What's up, Patty?
What's going on, guys?
How you doing?
Good. So, I like throwing questions at you guys all the time because there's two of you. So,
Yeah.
the first one, before we get into the roster breakdown next week, which I know you guys are going to do, and previewing the Bengals game the subsequent week, sight unseen, and I'm going to bring up something that I brought up a little while ago, I think after the draft and after the schedule came out. You guys think, honestly, regardless of who the starting quarterback is, question one, do they have a chance to beat the Bengals? Because, like I brought up before, many weeks ago, they are notoriously slow starters in the Joe Burrow era. And if you look at one of the teams that's given them problems, over the past couple of years, it's been the Cleveland Browns in this system, And the second question, you were talking about wide receivers. Do you think, because for all intents and purposes, Tyquan's probably going to make the team, do you think with, if he has a few regular season games, something that we haven't seen from him, do you think he could actually become, not a great player, but kind of like a middle-of-the-road receiver and somebody that you could see contributing in the Drake May era, as it were, on this team? I'll take it off the air, and as always, you guys are great. Bye.
Thanks, Patty. So to the Tyquan thing, I'm not letting myself get duped that much with Tyquan. No, I don't feel like he's going to ever be an 1,000-yard receiver or anything crazy like that. But can he be a role player within the framework of this offense and the way that they're going to design this offense? Is going to be a little bit different than it was in the past. I would think so. That's where I'm at. I'm not going any further than that. I believe he could be a role player. He could be a field stretching role player. I'm trying to think of a good example, maybe a Philip Dorsett, but obviously a little bit different because he's longer and taller than Philip Dorsett was, but something along those lines, which is a serviceable NFL caliber field stretcher, but not Tyreek Hill, not Randy Moss, not a high volume guy, but somebody that could do that sort of thing. I could sell myself on that. That's about as far as I would go.
Yeah, just kind of that, like a Nelson Aguilar type, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
The best. I was trying to remember. Wasn't one? There's 10 Mike Williams. That's why I can't remember. Wasn't there a Mike Williams that played for the Steelers who was just a burner?
Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace. There's so many Mike Williams.
Yeah.
I always forget about Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace had a long career. He was in the league for 10 years. He had a couple 1,000-yard seasons early, but he was just kind of, all right, we're going to put you on the outside, and you're going to run a go ball, and he was consistent enough that he stayed on the field. Yeah, he got 10 touchdowns one year in Miami.
Signed a big contract with the Dolphins.
Right. Could he be that? That's probably his ceiling. That's probably Tyquan's ceiling.
Yeah.
Somewhere between Nelson Aguilar and Mike Wallace. But if he can put it together, that's the kind of player you're looking at.
I'll give you one more.
But he's got to stay healthy to be able to do that, which I'll believe when I see it.
Yeah, I'll give you one more just because of the body type.
Yeah.
Robbie Anderson. Actually, Jets, I hate to use prime with Robbie Anderson, but when Robbie Anderson was actually relevant.
Okay, I thought Robbie Anderson in Carolina, when he had that breakout year in Carolina, I was so ready to be this guy is it.
Yeah.
This guy's going to be an elite receiver. And then obviously he just completely fell off the map.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could see that. I hold it's Robbie Chosen now, by the way.
Whatever it is.
I hold Robbie Chosen in high regard.
Robbie Anderson.
For that one season. That one season, I was locked. I was locked in. I was ready to. I was on the bandwagon.
Remember when you met Mr. Purr?
It's the best. I remember when they came here for joint practice last year. He did a scrum.
Yeah.
But he was he looked kind of confused as to why the reporters were talking to him.
I'm sure he did. I think he always looks confused. That's just Robbie Anderson's face.
You're to go back to the point. You're exactly right. That kind of player where he wasn't the most technically sound wide receiver.
No.
He didn't run a diverse route tree. But if he needed somebody to run past the defense, he was pretty freaking good at it.
Fast guys run fast.
Right. And that's it. But not just fast, big and fat. And big, when I say big, I mean height.
Yeah.
Because that helps because that's length. It improves the catch radius.
That to me has always been Tyquan's.
Yeah.
Peak Robbie Anderson has always been Tyquan's ceiling.
Well, again, peak Robbie Anderson, you're talking about borderline all-pro.
No, he wasn't that good.
95 catches, 1,100 yards. He somehow only caught 3 touchdowns.
Okay, I
But
mean, maybe it's a little bit better than I thought, but still not
90
not
that year in
borderline
Carolina,
All-Pro.
and that I don't think that was a great Carolina team in 2020.
Okay, that he's not. Taekwon is never going to catch 95 passes, so that's out.
So Mike
Maybe
Wallace, for comparison, Mike Wallace's big year, and the yards are more, and maybe this is borderline All-Pro too, but Mike Wallace's big year, he caught 60 passes for 1,200 yards in 10 touchdowns. But he averaged 21 yards per catch. Like, if Taekwon's good, that's the guy he's going to be. He's going to average 21 yards per catch because he's only going to catch 2 or 3 balls a game. Kind of like Javon Baker. I think Javon Baker is the guy they wanted in that role. It didn't work out, and now here's Taekwon. He caught 60 for 1,200, 70 for 1,200. Later in his career, he caught 72 for 1,000 in Baltimore.
That's a good comp.
He's kind of the perfect Joe Flacco receiver.
Can I just call out somebody in the chat real fast?
Yeah, you looking at the chat?
I did look at the chat. I've been trying to look at the chat a little bit more. I know you usually monitor the chat, but I like to look at it and see if there's anything.
We do
interesting.
look. So, like, the guy
Yeah, we
called me
do.
chubby earlier. Like, we see that. You're going to call us out. We see it.
So I don't know. I don't even know how to say this guy's name. Ant Guipo.
Ant Guapo?
Ant Guapo. Yep.
He does not like you.
Ant Guapo claims that I was out on Pop Douglas.
Somebody else, it might have been him. Somebody claimed that you are too big of a college football fan and your opinions on players get blurred.
Somebody said that's probably you. They
We
probably
said both of us. It might apply to me.
Confused.
Honestly, no, he said Alex and Evan. He said you too. You, Evan, college football nut. Too big of a college football fan for your own good.
Apparently, though, I was down on the draft pick when they drafted Pop Douglas.
Honestly, don't remember. No, yeah, you liked Pop.
I have always liked Pop.
I think you were probably bummed they didn't take Zay Flowers, but
we saw Pop at the
we
Shrine
were at
Bowl.
we started the whole Pop Douglas thing.
We literally were the reason why Pop Douglas was on the map.
What
are we talking about?
If you looked on NFL mock draft database at that time and you see Pop Douglas's draft stock, he's like the 400th best player in the draft. And then the Shrine Bowl happened. We were the only 2 people that were talking about it at the Shrine Bowl. It shoots up.
That is blasphemy.
This is a Pop Douglas podcast.
I will allow people to call me out when I'm wrong, like I talked about earlier in the show. That's fine. But if you go, we were live on the air when they draft. Go watch my live reaction to them drafting Pop Douglas. I was pumped. I was in a depressed state when they gave me Jake Andrews and a kicker.
He says you were down, Evan, when he was drafted.
That is absolutely ridiculous. That is.
I'm trying to think.
Can't even be further from the truth.
Who might he be thinking of?
I have no idea.
You weren't down on Booty. I don't think you cared one way or the other.
The
So it's
guy-
not like the other receiver that year.
I remember my almost exactly what I said in the draft. I said Pop Douglas saved day 3 of the draft for the
Did
Patriots.
you? Day 3 Zay.
I said that.
That was the nickname. Day 3
I
Zay.
remember saying it. Ridiculous. Blasphemy. Just
He says you said it, so somebody's going to have to pull the tape.
yeah, go
But,
pull the tape
you-
of our day 3 draft show from 2023 of me being amped about Pop Douglas.
The only thing he might be thinking of. The only thing he might be thinking of is I go back to that would have been 23, right?
Yeah.
For like a month after the Shrine Bowl, you very much liked Pop Douglas, but you could not remember his name because there was another guy that was there. There were 2 guys that were, what's it called? When the 2 letters are the same, because he was Demario Douglas. We didn't know his nickname was Pop yet.
Yeah.
Demario Douglas, and there was a guy named Dallas Daniels.
Oh, yeah,
from
Dallas
Jackson
Daniels.
State.
Yeah.
And that was
We
we kind of liked too as like a special teams player.
No,
he is not.
he was in the. It was they literally had 3 levels of the same player at the Shrine Bowl. It was Zay Flowers was the top guy, Pop was the second guy, and then Dallas Daniels was the third guy.
Zay didn't practice, so it was Dallas Daniels and Demario Douglas in the same role, like switching off drives. By the way, Dallas Daniels is playing professional football in the state of Massachusetts, Worcester Pirates.
Oh my God,
good for him. But that's the only thing I can think of.
God.
It took you like a month to figure out Demario Douglas's name. I do remember that.
I could not. He was like my day 3 sleeper. Like I could not have been higher on Demario Douglas. Anyways, all right, we can move on. I just
remember Jadakiss Bonds.
Yes,
that's a great name.
Yes. All right, let's answer some of these emails.
He was also in that
shall
like
we?
slot
last
role.
30 minutes here. So
he's in Canada.
Are you done?
Yeah.
This question is Ryan in Dublin. He has a question for you, mostly Alex, because he knows that I'm not going to know the answer to this one. So apparently, Florida State Georgia Tech is playing in
Week 0, baby. College football on Saturday.
They're playing in Dublin. Did you know that they're playing in Ireland?
Yeah.
All right. So they're playing in Dublin. So his question for you, Alex, is who are a couple of key players for the draft next year from Florida State, and from Georgia Tech that maybe he can look out for while he's at the game.
So I'll have something up on 98.5 The Sports Hub on Friday.
I knew you would.
Kind of players to watch for this whole season, not just week one. When it comes to Georgia Tech, it's not a big year for the draft. I don't even know if they have any guys projected to be drafted. That can always change, but right now, not so much. I'll give you two guys from Florida State, one specifically for the Patriots and one that's relevant to the Patriots that they won't draft, but is still they might draft. All right. The guy Patriots fans should know, and I actually talked about him last year. I thought he was going to come out last year, and he didn't, is Patrick Payton. Patrick Payton is an edge rusher. He was opposite Jared Verse last year, so he put up some big numbers. He's now back. He's going to be their primary guy off the edge. When we talked about this earlier with Keon White, Evan. This is actually a guy that you specifically should watch because this goes to your take. Yeah. Keon White is a disruptor. He's not a finisher. You want the guy on the edge, the Josh Uche type, just pin your ears back and go after the quarterback?
Yes.
That's Patrick Payton. And what I really like about him, he played last year at like 225, he's 6'5". Played last year at like 225, 230. He weighed in this year at 250. So now he's got more that Matthew Judon kind of body type. Yeah. He's actually a little, I think, bigger, but he was a speed player last year. So if he can keep up some of that speed and agility coming off the edge, this is a guy that's projected to be a late first, early second round pick. So certainly in range where the Patriots should be taking an edge guy, assuming they go tackle at the top of the draft. You know, if you get a veteran wide receiver, now edge is probably your biggest need.
Yep.
Patrick Payton is one of the guys for Patriots fans to watch this year. Absolutely somebody to tune into. He wears number 11, and he's mostly going to be rushing off that weak side. The other guy...
On Florida State, right?
On Florida State, yeah. Georgia Tech, there's really no draft. Haynes King's fun to watch. Their quarterback, enjoy that, but he's like 5'11", really just runs. Time. He's kind of... he's got some... Not Stetson Bennett in his game, but like... honestly, a little Max Duggan, but he doesn't have the swagger. The other guy to watch, and Evan, you've heard me talk a lot about this guy, and I'll give you two reasons why Patriots fans should watch him. Okay. It's DJ Uiagalelei, the quarterback from Florida State.
No.
Listen.
No.
Listen.
No.
Let me explain it.
Did you... Bo Nix? Is that where you're going with this?
Sort of. There's two reasons I think Patriots fans should watch him.
Okay.
One is Bo Nix / Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
It's a copycat league.
Yep.
If Jaden Daniels has a big year, everybody is going to be looking for that older transfer quarterback who's projected lower in the draft that suddenly pops off. The other guy that relates somewhat to DJ Uiagalelei, copycat league, Spencer Rattler. DJ Uiagalelei has had a very similar career path. They're different quarterbacks. DJU, I'm going to call him DJU because it's easier to say.
Yeah.
6'5", 245, big arm. Spencer Rattler's smaller, more mobile, but former top recruit, went to a bad situation.
Not just former, like number one
recruit. When I say top recruit, I mean I think DJ was number 2 by the time his class ended, but he was number 1 for a while.
Because that's the same class that Drake was in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Went to Clemson, didn't work. Went to Oregon State last year, made some progress. Clemson ruined the kid. I don't know what they were trying to turn him into, but it wasn't right. Went to
Sweeney, so probably something stupid.
Right. Went to Oregon State last year, made progress. Now he's at a Florida State offense that I think really plays to his skill set. They got a ton of speed. They're going to be throwing the ball all over the yard. He's got a big arm. He's not a runner, but he's effective when he gets to the outside. If he has a good year, teams are going to... He's a guy that I could see becoming this year's Jaden Daniels, in that nobody thought this guy because he was in the wrong place in the wrong time for a long time. If he has a good year, not a guarantee. The other reason Patriots fans... So in that sense, how that relates to the Patriots.
Yes.
Let me finish the take.
Yeah.
There are going to be teams that need quarterbacks next year. The Raiders, the Giants, etc. They might need to move up with the Patriots. The more good quarterbacks, the better, even though the Patriots aren't drafting one, because if they're in a position where you can draft Will Campbell and trade down, or you can draft Will Johnson and trade down, or James Pierce and trade down, the more quarterbacks, the better. So it's good for Patriots fans if DJ Uiagalelei is good. Let's say he's not good. I still think he's relevant to the Patriots, and I'll tell you why. What is the Elliott Wolf Packer way approach to drafting quarterbacks?
Joe Milton.
Well, I was going to say every other year, if not every year.
Right, that's
so they're going to draft. I would not be surprised if they draft a quarterback next year. It's going to be later.
It would be Joe Milton.
So Uiagalelei, he's a little different than Joe Milton, but
he reminds me a little of Joe Milton.
Big quarterback, big arm.
Big quarterback, big arm who can't read the field.
Big quarterback, big arm.
Who can't read the
They
field.
drafted Drake May. Big quarterback, big arm. Unless you want to say Drake May can't read the field.
No, I'm saying that it's similar to Joe Milton.
Yeah.
Me.
So anyway,
he's
that's
not
the
quite
point.
as raw toolsy as like Joe
And
Milton's
he's-
got a bigger arm and all that, but
Milton has a bigger arm, and I think Uyunglele is a little more developed in his mechanics. Maybe not reading the field, his mechanics are better. They're gonna. I would not be surprised if they draft a quarterback on day 3 next year, and DJU is definitely the kind of quarterback that they seem to target.
okay. So
Patrick Payton, DJU.
So I had the classes wrong, but I went down this rabbit hole when
Yeah.
I wrote my story about Drake May after the draft. Drake May was 2021. DJU was 2020.
Yeah.
But Drake May had an offer from Clemson on the table that he turned down because DJU was going to Clemson.
Okay.
So the number 1 recruit in that class was Bryce Young. Bryce Young committed to USC.
Yep.
He's going to play for Lincoln Riley at
Yep.
USC. He decommitted from USC and then flipped to Alabama, obviously. So he goes to Alabama. Drake May in the 21 class was committed to Alabama because he thought he was going to be the guy after the Mac Jones.
Yeah.
Correct. So he decommits from Alabama because Bryce Young committed to Alabama. DJU commits to Clemson. So he doesn't go to Clemson because DJU's at Clemson. CJ Stroud goes to Ohio State. So Drake May doesn't go to Ohio State because CJ Stroud commits to Ohio State. So all of these sort of like dominoes is like what led to Drake May eventually going to North Carolina.
So as much of a college football fan as I am, I don't follow recruiting a ton. I'm like aware of the big players, but I don't track it. I don't really look beyond the senior class. You think like the draft and free agency, and there's a lot of moving pieces there. Following recruiting, especially in the modern era, it's a
wild west
roller coaster.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you know who's number 3 in that class was Brian Brzee, who I think a lot of people know, first round pick. Number 4 was Julian Fleming. I'm really interested to see, and we can get back to modern times after this. I have one more draft thought for you. So
I
Julian
have another
Fleming.
draft question for you, I think. So
Okay. For all of the stars that have come through Ohio State at wide receiver, do you know who the highest ranked recruit was? Going back to, I think we're going back to like Paris Campbell here.
Yep.
The highest ranked recruit was a guy named Julian Fleming. He was the 4th ranked recruit in that class. Bryce Young, DJU, Brian Brzee, Julian Fleming. He is the one guy they couldn't figure out. He was there for 4 years. He was fine. He was never great. He kept getting passed over by these other guys. And now he's at Penn State for a grad year.
Yeah.
So he's going to come in the draft. And there's going to be a lot of people that say, Julian Fleming, red flag. He's the one receiver Ohio State couldn't figure out. I don't know why they couldn't figure him out. I never watched him that closely because, again, he couldn't really get on the field. You can't tell me you're not interested by the one receiver that Ohio State couldn't crack. And he's like their highest ranked recruit at the position.
That doesn't bode well. Brian Hartline couldn't do anything.
But like, I'm curious. And it's not that he was bad. He just kept getting passed by all these other guys. And I'm kind of curious why.
I'm actually, in the answer to this question, I know this is not wasn't your point, but the answer to this question is probably that Ohio State pays Brian Hartline like a gajillion dollars to stay there. I am so shocked that an NFL team hasn't offered Brian Hartline just an absolute
I say this all the time.
Brinks truck. Like, how have you not, and I get that some of it is like chicken or the egg because they recruit so well. So like you could say that Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to be good no matter where he went.
Well, he was not as highly ranked of a recruit.
And it's also just not Marv. Like it's Marv, it's McLaurin, it's JSN.
Yeah.
It's like the list goes on and on and on of recent Ohio State, Wilson, Olave. Like all these guys are just studs. And Brian Hartline is the coach. Like he's the one, he's the whisperer. He's the wide receiver guy. So I can't believe that an NFL team hasn't just thrown. I'd throw $10 million at that guy to coach my
Remember
receivers.
the name, and I already forgot his name, Julian Fleming. I'm curious what you think when we get there.
All right, a couple of there's one draft question, but also there's a bunch of questions, actually, believe it or not, about Cole Strange.
Okay.
So there's been some reporting about, I guess Giardi might have had a little nugget about Cole Strange and his timetable and timeline. So the number one question, I guess, is are you expecting anything from Cole Strange? But a secondary question to that, someone actually asked if we feel that Cole Strange could be a center when he comes back. And I have a little bit of a theory about this. But do you think that Cole Strange is... Are you expecting Cole Strange to contribute at all this year?
It's tough to say because their guard play's been good. And they clearly don't want to mess with that interior if it's working. I don't know that there's a job for him when he comes back.
I'm with you.
Maybe they rotate him in, and maybe they he takes some snap, like 20 or 30% of the snaps a game from City Soj, or just to keep him fresh, right? To keep him healthy.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a full-time job waiting for Cole Strange when he gets back.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
That being said, I do think he can play center. Maybe the job is backup center.
Yeah. So, to the center point, I feel this way about center, and he would be a really small tackle, but he just meets the length threshold for tackle. But just hear me out for a second. So the biggest problem that I see with Cole Strange when I watch him is that he is too small to play on the interior at guard. He just gets bodied. He is not powerful enough to play at that spot. Now, the counter to that could be, well, if he's in an outside zone scheme instead of a downhill scheme, maybe that translates a little bit better. I'll allow for that. I'll give that possibility to him. But what I see most of the time with Cole Strange against NFL caliber, like starting caliber defensive tackles, is I can't get the images of like DeForest Buckner and Quinnen Williams just manhandling him in pass protection. That's the concern with me with Cole Strange. So what do? If he's not burly enough to play guard? Center is an option because center, usually you're uncovered most of the time, or it's a different role, different position. Center is also really important in this system because center sets the pace of the line in the run game. Yeah. In an outside zone scheme. So if he's the best athlete that they have probably at the position, then he can be somebody that could get out and reach and hit the second level and all those kinds of stuff. I'm intrigued by center. Tackle is probably loftier, probably less likely, but just wouldn't you, just from a body type standpoint, just think about it from a body type standpoint. Cole Strange going up against 250-pound edge rushers instead of Cole Strange going up against 320-pound nose tackles just feels like a better matchup to me for him, right? So I think it's lofty. Yeah. The technique's different. You're playing in space. It's probably too much of a transition. Center is probably more realistic. But if I'm the Patriots, I'm starting to think about, how do I get Cole Strange away from Quinnen Williams?
But you also have a guy that's coming off a very significant knee injury, and now you're asking him to be very mobile.
Yep.
And that's a tough ask.
It is a tough ask. There's no doubt about that. All right. Paul is asking about the Layden Robinson pick.
Oh, by the way, there's a theory in the chat that it was Paul Perillo who didn't like Pop Douglas, not you.
So I don't want to pick on Paul too much because he's not here. I'd rather pick on him to his face. But Paul doesn't have time for the day 3 of the draft. All those guys.
You barely have time for day 3 of the draft,
unless it's a guy like Pop Douglas.
Or you get annoyed with me after the top 100.
I don't do as much studying of the film after the top 100. I usually try to do the top 125, just so that I know everybody that gets drafted in the top 100. Right, that's big to me. But yeah, usually by the end of the 4th round is when my film study stuff, and then I just have notes from other people, the Beast and whatever. But yeah, Paul is not everybody on day 3 of the draft to Paul is a lottery ticket, which is,
he's not wrong.
It's pretty fair.
Yeah.
To us, it's we talk about Red Sox prospects, and I always joke about Marcelo Meyer being a bust and things like that. To us, it's like that. It's like Tyler Milliken getting all jazzed up about Roman Anthony, right? That's day 3 of the draft to us. But to Paul, day 3 of the draft is there's a 10% chance this guy actually turns into an NFL player. So why would I waste my time, right? That's the sort
Roman Anthony, not a 6th round pick kind of player. Okay, anyway,
still in the minors. I just said that just to
Luther Burden sucks. He's still in college. He's not in the NFL yet.
I mean,
it's essentially what you're saying.
We don't know about Luther Burden yet. He might suck. So here's the draft question I wanted to ask you, and it's more draft philosophy than it is about prospects. But the question is, we all know that left tackle is going to be a big need.
Yeah.
Receiver is still out there as need a big fish at receiver. But is there a chance that pass rusher, outside edge rusher, like I like to call them, you call them outside linebackers, if that replacing Matthew Judon, to simplify it even more for people, is there a world where that ends up actually being their biggest draft need? Can we get to the point where they sign T. Higgins? I'm just going dream pie in the sky here. They sign T. Higgins. Maybe they sign a serviceable veteran left tackle or something like that. And outside linebacker pass rusher ends up being the top need in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's their third biggest need. So
Yeah.
definitely. I would say corner could sneak in there too.
Yep.
I wouldn't rule that out. Yeah, no, it could absolutely happen. I just don't think they're going to find that tackle. And receiver they can remove from the needs relatively easily. And when I say that, I mean give up the second round pick, give up $30 million. Right? Get CeeDee Lamb, get DK Metcalf. People know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
You're not getting that equivalent at tackle, and I don't think another bridge left tackle is the answer. We talked about this last week, how long
Keeps
they
kicking
strung
the
it
can
along
down the
with
road.
Trent Brown. You got to answer that question. This is kind of what I said about quarterbacks in the last draft. And there are going to be people who say, well, there's these receivers, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is a position that's hard to get. You have a chance to get an elite prospect at it. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. That simple. Do it. And so I still think it's Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. I did a little more deep digging on that yesterday, by the way. Might be closer between the two than I thought. And I mean that as a positive for Kelvin Banks, not a negative for Will Campbell.
So I'm not sure about that, but it's not because I don't like Calvin Banks. So Calvin Banks, I watch a lot of him because who's the other tackle at Texas?
Oh, it was something Jones.
Got drafted this past year.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I remember. It's crazy how we obsess about these names for like 4 months and they just fall out of our brains. Christian Jones.
Christian Jones. Yeah, Christian Jones, Worthy, Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah, there's a lot of Texas to
I was
watch.
just watching that offense all spring long. So I did watch a little bit of Calvin Banks, like out of the corner of my eye. He's a stud. He's really good. I would put him in like the Alt Fashanu tier.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that Will Campbell's like S tier special.
See, I would go, and here's the thing with these two guys, and I realized this about this draft yesterday. I have a slight take on it. I can give you if you want, but the top of this draft is all true juniors. Campbell, Banks, McMillan, Burden, Pierce, and Johnson. Those are the 7 guys. We can even throw in Deion Walker from Kentucky. Those are the guys we're realistically going to talk about for the Patriots. Every single one of those guys is a true junior. I don't necessarily, like, it's good you're getting younger players. There's more runway. The only take I really have on it is whichever guy you want the Patriots draft the most, Campbell, Burden, whoever, you want to root for that team to win the national championship. Because the last thing we need is Will Campbell going back for some unfinished business in a big NIL bag.
Oh, God.
Right?
No.
But they're so young, so there's still a long way to go. And that's the thing. Alt had a little more experience.
Yeah.
At this now, by the time Campbell gets to the draft, he'll be even with Alt. But there's still a whole year to play out. We have to see what happens. As it stands right now, and I'm not saying Campbell can't catch Alt. As it stands right now for me, from the last 2 drafts, Campbell, Alt, Campbell, Banks, Fashanu.
Yeah.
That's how I'd rank it.
That's fair.
But I think you're projecting a little more going into this season.
Yeah.
I'm saying if Will Campbell came to the draft today without having played his junior season, that's right, have him.
So the reason why I have Will Campbell maybe a little bit ahead of Joe Alt is that the one, I love Joe Alt, but the one knock that I had that you'd have on Joe Alt is that he's not overly mean. Like, he's not a nasty finisher. He's more of a dancing bear than he is like a physical guy.
Sure.
Will Campbell's nasty. Like, Will Campbell finishes. Like, he puts dudes in the ground. While also having the footwork and the agility and all that kind of stuff to dance on an island, right, with pass rushers. So he's got a little bit more snarl or nastiness to his game than Joe Alt. Joe Alt is, I think, a great comparison. He's a little bit bigger and like more prototypical, but remember like Jake Matthews with the Falcons? Like that's who I think of with Joe Alt. Whereas with Will Campbell, he has a lot of those same traits, but with like a little bit more nasty,
like a Taylor Lewan kind of.
Yeah, it's a good comp.
Yeah, that's who I see a little bit.
Yeah, he's mean. Like, and he's gonna finish blocks and things like that.
Banks too. Banks has a nasty streak to him too.
That's what I love.
We're gonna have fun.
Guys.
We're gonna have a lot of fun with these guys.
And I understand, and on PU, you can't throw shade at Paul. He's not even here. I wish I was doing this to his face. But the offensive line talk sometimes.
Yeah.
I see some glossy eyes and some people checking their phones and stuff like that. There is nothing more reassuring to me for Drake May's long-term development than drafting a stud left tackle and just knowing his blind side is protected for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, that to me would just be so, like, I'd be such a sigh of relief. Would I be as excited as if they got a number 1 receiver, right? Like, if there were, I don't know if Luther Burden's in this category, but if there was a Marvin Harrison Jr. in this draft and they drafted that guy instead, would I be more excited Probably just because it's a receiver
What
and
if
it's
they
this shiny
trade
toy.
for somebody like that?
Sure, but it's just the shiny toy versus like the socks on Christmas, right? But Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks being the blindside protector for Drake May and finally filling that need after years of kicking the can down the road, I'd have a huge smile on my face. I'd be like, yes, we got a left tackle. This is great. This is what we've all wanted. It would be great. So I'm all aboard left tackle. But I could see pass rusher, if they somehow find a way to get a left tackle in the veteran market, which seems unlikely, but if they do.
So I'd be the projected top guy right now is a guy named James Pierce from Tennessee. So unlike some of the other guys who are true juniors, so Campbell and Banks and Burden and McMillan actually all started as true freshmen.
Yeah.
They all had Burden started like halfway through his freshman year, but they essentially all have 1.5 to 2 years of experience. Pierce only started last year. He played 13 games as a true freshman, but it was mostly on special teams or like late in games. So his first year is good. He had, I think, 56 pressures and 10 sacks in 13 games. But it's just 1 year. And the thing about Pierce, really good pass rusher, really doesn't give you anything against the run.
Yeah.
And would they be willing to take a guy, and we'll see what he does. He has more variance. He could end up not being the top pass rusher. There's a guy named Abdul Carter at Penn State who's going to get some attention too, but Pierce is the highest ceiling. Would they take a guy like Pierce who projects to be an elite pass rusher if he can't play against the run?
So is he like a Brian Burns type?
He's not quite that like powerful.
That's who I think of when you tell me
But Burns
that.
is like big and powerful. Pierce is, he's got good size, but he's more of a finesse rusher.
Okay. All right. Let's take this last call and then we got to wrap it up. Connor is in Florida. What's up, Connor?
Hey, so I just had a question for you guys, and I just wanted your thoughts on this. So back in like 2021, 2022, we had like a pretty good interior line with like Mason, we had Owenu, Karras, Andrews, we had Andrews, and then we also had Tooney for a little bit before, right before Mac Jones' rookie year. What do you think Bill's like logic was in just basically letting all of them go, then forcing them to draft Cole Strange, and then just the trickle down effect with that with you draft Strange that year when you could have probably gotten, if they decided to go Trent McDuffie with the original pick they had before trading it. Then the next year when you picked Gonzalez, you could have picked a receiver. Just want to know your thoughts and what you thought Bill might have been thinking with that.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Connor. Look, we've been down this road before.
Yeah.
It's, to me, the beginning of the end for the offensive line, if you want to call it that, was letting Joe Tooney walk in free agency.
Well, the beginning of the end of the offensive line is when Scar left.
No, because Carmen Bacello had the line in good
fair
shape.
enough.
Okay, so it started, to me, with the decision to let Joe Tooney walk to the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like, he was, in a lot of ways, it's similar to what they've done now, where it was like, it's a lot of money for Mike Onwenu as a guard, but he's one of your best football players. And right now, you just don't have a whole lot of good football players on the roster. And they were kind of in that spot at the same time, too, with Joe Tooney. And they let Joe Tooney walk to Kansas City, who, by the way, Joe Tooney is like low-key on a Hall of Fame trajectory.
Yeah, he might be the best guard in football.
He's unreal. He's like an all-pro. He's won like 17 Super Bowls at this point. Like, he's going to be in the conversation for a gold jacket if he keeps on going.
I think he is. I think he's going to get one. I don't think it's a conversation.
So, Joe Tooney, then in the same offseason, 2021, this is a year later from Tooney, they lowball Ted Karras in free agency and they trade Shaq Mason, within like a week of each other.
Yeah.
And they created this gigantic hole at guard. Now they had Onwenu. So they had one guard spot, but like the caller said, that prompted the domino effect to taking Cole Strange in the first round. What Belichick was thinking to me was, guard's not a premium position. I'm not going to pay premium dollars for guards because I feel like I have one in Onwenu already, and I can just draft one and get him much cheaper than what I'm going to have to pay Shaq Mason or Joe Tooney or even Ted Karras, and we'll just draft and replace, and everything will be just fine. The problem was they didn't draft well.
Right.
They drafted Cole Strange, and it didn't work out. The other thing that I think was really key with the offensive line, and then we got to wrap it up, Carmen Bracella leaving with Josh McDaniels to Vegas.
Yeah.
Carmen Bracella leaves after the 2021 season. he goes to the Vegas Raiders with Josh McDaniels, and the Patriots replace Carmen Brasillo with Matt Patricia.
Who is also dealing with being the offensive coordinator while he's coaching the offensive line.
And at that point, what ended up happening is that a lot of the young guys that they had in the pipeline, including Cole Strange, to the point, their development just got derailed because they weren't getting coached properly.
Right.
So they have that. The whole Matt Patricia thing goes awry. Then Adrian Clem, that whole thing was a disaster last year. So really these linemen, and I think a lot of these guys that have been on the Patriots are having this realization, like, holy crap, we have Scott Peters actually has like a strike system and like has like rules for us. And like
Scott Peters is here. He's available.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, we're getting coached. And you're seeing that with, improvements from guys, rookies, Layden Robinson, Caden Wallace getting better. Vidarian Lowe. I know everybody's like lightning rod right now, but he's gotten better, and that's what's happened with a lot of these guys. So hopefully the coaching comes back to earth and that solidifies a lot of things. But yeah, that conversation's been ongoing. We've all had that on various platforms over the last couple years as a misstep from Belichick. All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. Next week, I believe we're going to have to be on Thursday next week, Alex, because the studio is not going to be available on Wednesday because of some technical stuff going on.
Well, that works because by then the roster will be more set.
Yeah, so we're going to probably be back Thursday, maybe 10 a.m. Thursday, Marine. Nope, afternoon Thursday. Yeah, afternoon Thursday.
Well, honestly, Thursday might be like they might have practice in the morning and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. So we'll figure it out. But we're hoping that
you guys actually might be in the morning on Thursday.
Okay, we'll figure it out. We're hoping that we'll have be able to set a time, permanent time for in-season shows on probably on Thursdays. But we'll see. We'll let you guys know. But just before we sign off here, we got to shout out Bridgestone because they're the official tire of the New England Patriots. It's proud to partner with Sullivan Tire, New England's headquarters for quality Bridgestone tires. Visit sullivantire.com to find a location near you. And one last time, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.